Hello, welcome to the first episode of Mindful Chaos. I'm your co-host, Justin.
And this is Julia.
So today we'll talk about...
Spirituality.
Okay.
So I've been thinking about this episode specifically for quite a long time because I think spirituality is quite a hard subject to define.
Mm-hmm.
So spirituality is basically everything that's non-material.
Yeah.
Do you agree with that?
Somewhat. Yeah.
Okay, why?
Because I think sometimes probably for me, from my own personal experience, like spirituality can kind of manifest in a physical form.
Okay.
So not necessarily like it's like, because it's kind of like a woo-woo type of term that sometimes people think about. And I have some experience in the childhood I can share later on. But yeah, I think we should talk about what's spirituality for different people and how they interpret it.
Okay, so spirituality for me. Spirituality, I heard this girl saying yesterday that spirituality is being able to go into your darkest side, accepting you have a dark side, and looking into it and actually accepting it and living through your darkest side. And through that, you're basically enlightening the part of you that you don't like and accepting it as yourself. And I think that is one of the main things that spirituality does. It's accepting your totality of a person.
Interesting. And do you agree with that definition, or like that's just one of them that you think it is?
Well, I think it's one of the main things that spirituality did for me somehow. I had a lot of like things that I didn't accept of myself. And then all of a sudden I started looking into them and seeing that it was a part of me. It was just a wholeness of me. And by accepting the totality of me, I kind of was able to accept the totality of others and accepting that there's this whole other part of us that is hard to understand. But when it comes to spirituality, it's you're accepting your wholeness of you.
Interesting. Because I also like, I mean, my personal experience, like as a kid, like I didn't know about these stuff, but I was always very sensitive, you know, like let's say in Chinese culture that we have a tomb sweeping every year around April, and we go as a family, sometimes super early when the sun is not even was not even rising, and we will go to temples or let's say family tombs. But those kind of places are basically where these quote unquote spirits hang out.
Okay.
Right. And as a kid, I always feel very weak going to those places, or very sensitive, that has like a weird chest tightness. And I would say like I was probably the first encounter with like, okay, something is a bit off, but I could not explain what it was, you know? So it's very interesting that we were talking about it, accepting the totality. I don't know if this is a Western concept or it's just everybody has different experience and interpretation of it. Okay. And I'm actually curious to hear, like, when was the last time, or like when was the time that you actually felt something that's like non-physical to you personally?
Oh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
Because again, my spiritual path started less than a year ago.
Yeah.
And it was like I woke up one day and all of a sudden I could see auras. Okay. I could see people's auras. It was like seeing energy with color outside of them. Mm-hmm. And then I also feel my own spirit. So I could move energy around, you know, and it was so weird for me because it was like I woke up and I could do all of these things, and it was either I went crazy or I was actually believing that there was like a spiritual realm that I wasn't like aware about, that I would listen to it my whole life. People always talks about like spiritual like realm besides the material world. But I think it's really hard to actually understand it, like hear it and see it until there's this awakening that happens. And my awakening happened like a year ago, but it's interesting to know that you never had an awakening. For you, it was like, you just knew.
But like when you term it as like a awakening, what does that mean? Is it like, oh, I wake up from a dream, or you wake up, you're like, this is a dream? Or like it's something like, oh, I suddenly see this color, or like you never had the smell and be like, ooh, this is a taste I never had. Like, well, what do you mean by that?
You had never heard of a spiritual awakening?
I mean, I tried DMT once and I died. So I can imagine that kind of experience of like, whoa, okay, what was that? That was new to me. Right? And that's why we talked about, like, I believe, at least for men, it's about like leading a life with like abundance of experiences, because I wouldn't know what I don't know. And I don't think I woke up one day seeing colors of energy, you know?
Okay. Wait, right now, I want to touch a subject that you just said, which is dying.
Okay.
I think that dying and accepting that death is not only physical is one of the main things about spirituality.
Okay.
Which is when you discover that death goes way beyond like just dying when you're old. I also died 3 times during my spiritual awakening. Okay.
And this all happens in the last year?
This year.
Okay.
Yeah.
But let's just say past 12 months.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So it happened with marijuana for myself.
Okay.
But I smoked, and all of a sudden I felt like my spirit completely separated from my body.
You saw your head?
Yes.
Okay.
And then I went to bed and I just accepted my death. I was like, you know what? It's okay. Like, I'm dying. It's okay.
And what was the setting?
It was just me in my bed alone.
At home?
Yeah, at home.
You smoke weed at home by yourself?
Yeah.
And then you saw your own body?
Yes.
And then you're like, okay, I guess I'm dying.
Indeed.
Okay, that's pretty.
And then
that was
after
different than my
that,
first weed marijuana experience. Okay.
But then, hold on. After that, it was like I accepted and I understood that there was a part of me dying. And there are constantly parts of me dying every single day, every single second, that make me being like reborn as a person.
Interesting. Because now when you say this, now like, literally I'm visualizing like our hair, our skin cells, like actually we are dying every day in some form and changing. So I didn't connect that or thought about that could be spiritual. Okay. That was just interesting. Yeah. So, okay. So that was the first marijuana experience of dying. And then the second one, well, I'm trying to piece it back together. Like, when do you see the aura? Well, you say it was during the manic episode, or they were separate experiences, or they were all colluded into one period of time that was just so intense. And it was like waves that's like up and down. They
were all colluded into one period of time. It was really harsh. It was really harsh. It all started on September 22nd of 2022.
Okay.
That was the day I had my awakening.
Okay. So like a little more than a year ago.
Yes. But that was my first awakening. Like, back then I didn't see auras. I didn't die. It was just like, it was like a thing got out of my eyes, and I could suddenly see very clearly that there was much more to life than this. Yeah,
you're talking about, like, now you said things coming out your finger sometimes.
Yes, yes. I can actually feel energy. Like, it's crazy.
Okay. So and then the marijuana thing happened after.
Yes, it happened after, because back then I didn't smoke.
Okay. And then what was the second and the third time that's like near death?
So the second time I had shrooms.
Okay.
And I was back in my bed. I don't do this at home, please. Please don't do this at home. I had shrooms. I went to my bed and I decided I was going to meditate for 8 hours.
Okay.
For like, as long as the shroom like trip lasted, I was meditating. And I started seeing my past lives. Okay. I literally had memories of my past lives. And like such vivid memories that honestly I could tell you I did not live them right now. But it was very scary. And then I kind of died again. It was like I didn't feel my body anymore. It was just my spirit. And then I was reborn into my life again, into this present life.
On shrooms?
On shrooms.
And what is the dosage for people who are more experienced psychonauts? Like, do you remember?
I will not say that.
Oh.
I don't care. Like
hero dose, like 5 grams. Like,
I don't know.
So
I
you
have
actually
no idea.
weren't aware.
Yes, please don't do this at home. I'm so serious. If you do it, please go to a shaman or have someone direct it, because it's not good for you to do it alone. It ended up on a psychosis episode for me. So please don't do this at home.
We can probably dive into that in other episodes.
Yes, totally.
in terms of I wouldn't want to categorize, but basically we can talk about mental health in other episode on bipolarities and all that stuff. So, okay. And what is the third time?
So the third time, it was also with weed. I was like walking in the park, not in the park, but in the woods back in Canada. And it was like I started meditating and I just saw everything moving. Everything just started moving. I can concentrate really, really, really hard when I meditate, and I can literally produce DMT on my own brain. Like it's really,
which we do. The body does produce it, yes.
And you can do it like on purpose, you know? And so once again, it was like my body completely separated, and I started downloading a lot of information of like past, like people living in the world, you know, like gods. It was really fucking crazy. And yeah, then I once again, I just came back and I was like on Earth again. It was really crazy.
So tying all these like experiences and to the first thing that we're talking about in terms of definition and what we talked about, like how do you think people can learn from these experiences and apply to their life? Because now, like before, we're talking about the definition, right? Mm-hmm. And for me, it's like you talk about the oneness, and you talk about like 3 different near-death experiences, and how you have quote unquote awakening. And not making fun, because I'm very like type A, you know, like problem solving and stuff. Yeah. And me growing up wasn't raised like, oh, be in touch with your feelings, right? So, and it was a lot of subjective experience that I have in the past like 30 some years to understand like, okay, maybe there's something more than what we understood, right? And for me, let's say spirituality will be like, sometimes I experience stuff like I experienced with, has dabbled a bit with psychedelics in my late 20s. And the first time I had it actually was in Amsterdam while I was like 18, 19, but you were so young, you don't know what you're doing. Yeah. And it was just like, oh, let's go party in Amsterdam, right? So that was the first time I felt that I can control time. And time is actually it's kind of like a river and a water. Yes. And it was weird because like I was in the river and I was with my very close French friend. He's from Paris, very good family too. And we were just tripping out because we took it in the red light district. So all the, you know, like let's say the sex workers turn into like monsters and stuff. Oh. And we're starting like, and I really think the Dutch have a pretty funny sense of humor because they have like little mushroom, like fucking decoration, just like weird trippy stuff, Alice in Wonderland, like decoration, graffitis and stuff. So we were like really tripping hard. So we were like, dude, we got to get out of here because we just kept running in a circle. If anybody has been in Amsterdam, I recall it was a circle. So we couldn't get out. So we had to not steal, but basically somebody called the cab. We pushed the person away and just jumped in the cab and went back to the hotel that we were staying. And what calmed us down, remember we were 18, like this is the first time we were already smoking a lot. We didn't know what we were doing. We took 1 box. You're supposed to take only 1 box, but we took 2 boxes and we mixed it. And I remember it was a Hawaiian mix or something breed. And we were going crazy. What calmed us down was nature. So we went to the park at like middle of the night, like 11 p.m., right? We were talking to the trees and literally the universe was stopping. And I was just like, did you hear that? Did you hear time? And I was in the river. So that was the first time I really was kind of not quote unquote in control, but observing in some different way. And you can call that spiritual or not spiritual, but I didn't meditate at the time, you know? But back to what we're trying to define is like, or how can we share these experiences and help the people who are like listening? Because you know, like the mission of this is not just a podcast, it's a movement. It's like how do we find peace and how do we discover ourselves and how do we live better? And we're kind of discovering ourselves like here and there, getting bumps. Like we're lucky that, you know, we're still here. That would go crazy. Yes. Someone went borderline crazy. But like, yeah, like how do we help people, you know?
So you mean in mindful chaos, or do you mean throughout spirituality?
Just like within the framework of mindful chaos, how do we share our experience in a way that people can distill to lessons to apply in their how do they live better, right? Now, okay, they hear Justin and Julia like discover themselves in some crazy whatever ways, right? It was like, okay, how does that apply to me? And perhaps everybody people have different stories that they're welcome to hear and share down in the comments, you know?
Please do.
Yeah. Like, what do you think about that?
So, okay. In my case, I think the fact that spirituality exists kind of gives hope in a lot of ways. And I think by us sharing our experiences, we're somehow sharing a world that if we've never experienced it, it couldn't be true. It's hard to believe it, right? So by helping other people be like, okay, I've had these kind of experiences, and I can also relate to the fact that I have lived things that are unexplainable, right? But that somehow allow you to believe in something more than just yourself, to believe in the oneness, right? Back to like what we were talking about, that I actually want to hear about what you think oneness is and how will you define oneness?
Because of what you're saying this, I'm like when you talk about something that's like that you haven't experienced, you wouldn't know. And I was reading a book a couple months ago about near-death experience that we can cover later on. But to answer your question on the oneness part, like how do I feel about it, or what was my experience with oneness?
What is oneness?
Oh, okay. And now we can tap a bit more into the flow state I couldn't explain. So let's say when we're doing these kind of projects or all that stuff related to mindful chaos, or things that I just really, really love, like let's say skiing or swimming or being in nature, the time actually stops, or the sense of time actually dissipates in the background, and you are just immersed in the environment that you're in. It's like so present that, because I kept thinking about this idea about how the future becomes the present and the present becomes the past. So if you're just always moving along, there's actually no beginning, no end, and there's no future or past. There's only now. So if now only now matters, then you don't have to quote unquote worry, because what you worry, what will happen, will become the now anyway. Mm-hmm. Totally. Does that make sense? It becomes a bit like kind of like, wait, what the fuck he's talking about, right? Mm-hmm. So what I worry will happen tomorrow will become today anyway. Yeah. Last night I couldn't sleep because I was too excited, wanted to record the podcast. But then now I'm recording it. Why was I worried last night? Mm-hmm. Like now we're in the flow that, okay, I need to watch out for the time, but still like you are here. Mm-hmm. You know, that's what I personally love the most. And I do try my best to, be around people who can cultivate that kind of environment and do things that I like. And I'm fortunate enough that I can choose what I do. You know, it's not like I work for a company, but running your own business is also another manifestation or vision to kind of be part of that path, if that makes sense.
Okay. So for what I can understand of what you define oneness is basically the fact that time doesn't exist.
Not just that. I would say that is one characteristic. And, meditating is also like one thing. It's like being in a state that is very tranquil, that you can actually observe your thoughts and decide whether you want to be in the thought or expand those thoughts as quote unquote you want. Yeah. So the time not being present is one thing, and also having like a very, very high level macro way of looking at your own brain and the environment. It's also another thing. And another thing I also like is like the intensity or the detail of sensation, whether it's hearing, taste, smell, sound, all these are, in my opinion, characteristics of oneness, right? You can also experience that through animals. Like I love dogs. You have dog. I have 3 dogs back home in Taiwan. And those are just different kind of aspects to experience that oneness / spirituality thing. You also can feel that when you go to temples, right? You go to churches. Like I'm not Christian or Catholic, but when you be inside a very magnificent building like those, you do feel that way, So.
But it's funny because I think you haven't mentioned a really important part of oneness, which is in my experience in my life has been to realize that everything is a mirror of yourself, right? And that's part of a big, big spirituality, which is like realizing that, for example, a lot of the things that I see within you,
okay,
it's because I see them within me as well. So it's a sense of we're all the same person. We're all the same. We're all coming from the same ball of energy that brought us to the world, right? Which is what we call God, right? So oneness is in a lot of ways realizing that you're not alone in this world, because such as animals and nature and everything that comes from the same idea of God is the same. You and me are the same, you know? And I think that's one of the main parts of spirituality, at least in my case, realizing you're not alone.
And now when you say that, I thought about like collective consciousness. You can look into collective dreams. Like there loose evidence that say like, okay, how different people who doesn't know each other woke up and be like had the same dream or very, very similar dream, or perhaps different parts of the dream, but they were part of that dream. So that's like the trippy stuff that we can probably explore later on. I haven't done much reading on those, but that's a very interesting aspects we can look into. You know, and what else should we kind of share in terms of our experiences on spirituality? Or like we also talked about how that affects the mental health, because it seems pretty obvious that it does tie into mental health.
I don't think it's obvious. Maybe at the beginning, like it's really hard because you understand mental health as something that just happens. Like you don't take responsibility on your mental health because you just give it kind of like, it just happens. I just, for example, have depression and that's it, right? And it's hard to take responsibility on that unless you realize that you actually have a choice. Not a choice, but you have a lot of things in which you could help your depression get better, for example, right? And I think that part of actually doing something for that and realizing you have like so much aid that you could do for yourself, I think that's spirituality.
I think probably one big problem, like in the Western world, like people probably view mental health as a physiological phenomenon.
Yes.
So there's a Western medicine kind of approach it from the physical part, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, you have mental health issue, let's take SSRIs, but there's a lot of, I guess, wisdom, like in many cultures, Hinduism or like, you know, Buddhism, they probably approach it in a different way.
Yeah, and actually mental health is not as bad. Like there are resources, there are like studies that say that mental health is way worse in Western countries than it is in like Eastern countries. And that's because I think there are a lot of like, for example, meditating, yoga, those are like tiny like things that just improve your mental health so much. Habits, you know, like having like good food, good nutrition. It's like there are many aspects to our health that have to do a lot with mental health specifically, that cannot, like, that we are just not aware in the Western world because we were taught that everything had to do with external factors instead of internal.
I think like probably we can touch up on some other episodes to talk about how mindfulness practice can do help with that. But yeah, I do agree that I hadn't thought in this kind of context is like, yeah, I guess in more Eastern philosophy or like like Asian countries, you know, who have like spiritual practices, they kind of have a different view on mental health, and the population are, I guess, actually relatively less neurotic, actually, you know?
Yes.
So that's like actually an interesting observation. I think lastly, we can probably kind of talk about like how this podcast and this kind of format, that just like conversation between us two, because we're also going to bring in like experts or people from different fields to kind of explore. The main mission is like, how do we build a multicultural global community that basically we can help ourselves find peace, discover ourselves, and also live better. And I think we probably have to kind of discuss like what is that we're going to do in the near future for the audience to kind of expect.
So I think a lot of what we're trying to do comes from having information about psychological, about physical, about spiritual health. And we want to bring people that can actually give you that kind of information, right? We want to give you tools. We want to give you just different resources for you to be able to know yourself better, because the more you know yourself, the better you're going to be, right? The more peace you're going to get. Like, it's all correlated to each other. So we're trying to make a platform and a movement to have people just know themselves better. And I think we're here for that. We're here to show you how we're getting to know each other and how we're getting to know ourselves, so that you can do that too.
Yeah, I think, and on that note, that will be our first episode of Mindful Chaos. And thank you guys for listening. Don't forget to subscribe and comment for anything that you guys want to share, your own near-death experience or psychedelic experience. We're super happy. We read all the comments, and I'm super excited to be doing this with Julia.
And well, happy holidays to everyone. Thank you so much for listening. See you on the next chapter.
Yes.